Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome everyone who is joining us today for our latest Keynote Tech Talk, Battle of the Browsers Inside Keynote Web Monitoring. My name is Aaron Rudger and I'm here today to kick us off, but we've got a lot of really great content, and so I want to go ahead and just get started with a few kind of administrative housekeeping items. So let's just go through a little bit of the agenda of what we're going to be covering today. And so first off, thank you very much for joining us. This is going to be a great discussion. We're going to talk about Keynote's recent browser-based monitoring agent upgrades. We're going to talk about those in the context of the overall market and technology surrounding browsers, web browsers. And we're not just going to focus narrowly down on the web browser experience on the desktop, but we're also going to be very inclusive about the mobile experience as well, and the implications for your business being online, delivering channels both desktop as well as mobile, and all the dynamics and aspects and issues and challenges associated with the emerging modernization of the browser technology and market space. So just a few kind of housekeeping items. Today we're going to be doing an interactive discussion, but throughout our discussion, and we're going to be sharing some content with you online through our Adobe Connect experience here, but throughout the discussion, please do feel free to send us any of your questions using the Q&A panel, which you'll notice in the bottom of your Adobe Connect interface there. Today's webcast is being recorded. We are hoping to get you out before the end of the hour. And so we're going to be giving you access offline to the recording as well as additional resources that you can share and socialize with your colleagues throughout your organization. Your audio is currently muted. If for any reason, presuming that you're not using the VoIP feature of Adobe Connect and you're connected to us using a telephone, you can touch *0 on your phone if you experience audio difficulties to reach an operator for assistance. As I mentioned, we'll share with you the content offline after the presentation. Some of it will be available online right in the context of our Q&A session. And we do recommend that as you are viewing the session, use the full screen mode. You'll notice that there's a little box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It's got arrows pointing in all different directions. That will expand your view to full screen mode. But when we do bring in polls, we do ask you to go back to your minimized view so that you can interact dynamically with those polling questions. We will do some interactive live polls. And then, of course, to access your Q&A panel, as well as some of the other resources, you'll need to, again, come outside of that maximized mode. So, with those housekeeping items sorted, I want to introduce today our main speaker, Adam Thier. He's our head of engineering here at Keynote, and Adam has been with us for a nice long time now, of maybe about,
7 months.
6 months, 7 months. But Adam comes to us with a wealth of experience from a number of really pioneering enterprise software companies like Datum and SAP. So we're really, really pleased and excited to have Adam here today. And he's going to share with you not only what Keynote is doing in the space of our real browser services for monitoring, but how we think about the technology landscape in general. So Adam, thank you for being with us today, and if you'd like to go ahead and get started, let's go ahead.
Okay, great. So good morning / good afternoon / good evening to everyone in the great, wonderful, wide world out there. Very pleased you could join us. My name is Adam Thier. As Aaron said, I'm with Keynote about 7 months now. I'm the great and powerful head of engineering. However, I did bring actual engineers with me here today. So if you have real questions or any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ping them in. And I'm sure if I say anything stupid, they'll reach over and smack me in the head and correct me. You've got my email address. This is not intended to be a one-shot presentation. Please feel free to open communication, send me emails, and I'd love to have great conversations with everyone out there. So we're going to cover some critical issues here today on what's happening with browsers. And what we do is we help people test and measure and monitor browsers. To do that, we build agents. And to build those agents, to do this effectively, we have to reverse engineer. So we have a team of incredibly smart engineers who have to literally pick apart every browser out there to understand what makes them tick, how they work. And the reason we do this is so that people like you on the phone can make sure that your digital presences are all optimal. So HTML5 definitely started a war of browsers again. It had been nice and quiet for a while, but now there is a serious war going on. What's going on? Security, security, security. You can't open the paper without seeing a security issue, somebody getting broken into. Divergence. HTML5 also has created, a problem for people like yourselves where any given digital property accessed through different browsers has a divergent experience. The elephant in the room is that mobile experience is crushing web experience, and how do we deal with that? And of course, we've all heard about Microsoft Spartan, which is probably the second biggest thing to happen in browsers in a while, given HTML5. So these are the topics we're going to cover, and with that, let's get started. So who is Keynote? We have thousands and thousands and thousands of agents around the world testing digital property. The reason we're having this is because starting next week, we're rolling out Real Browser Web Monitoring Release 13 and Mobile Web Monitoring Release 8, what formerly known as TXP and MWP. We spent a long time on this one. In fact, we're overdue in supporting IE11 and some of the other ones because having seen what we've seen over the past couple of years, we did a re-architecture of our agents so that we can be in a position to do plugins and stay current with new browsers very, very quickly, which was very fortunate for us given that all of a sudden Spartan came out of the blue. So we're rolling out this support starting next week, so over the next 6 weeks you'll see those thousands and thousands of agents all have this new technology involved in there. It's transparent to you for the most part, and we'll get into that in a minute, but we wanted to communicate to you what we know because you need to know what we know if you're going to maintain your digital properties because there's a lot going on, and we learned a lot, and it's important for us to communicate that all to you. So we want to start with a poll. So just as we've got to get to the exciting stuff, we will now interrupt you with a poll.
Just to make sure that you're paying attention.
Just so you're paying attention. But we want to know this because it's important to us in the way we're building what we're building, which is, are you standardizing your assets for all browsers, all versions? Are you more interested in specific versions, like the latest IE, the latest Chrome, the latest Firefox? Or is it some other combination? So we'll give you a few minutes to think about that. And the reason we ask this question is it absolutely impacts the architecture and the way we build the architecture.
So just as a reminder for everybody, again, if you are in the maximized mode for the presentation, you're going to want to unclick that box. And when you unclick that box, that should bring you back to the view where you can see the interactive poll in your screen. So if you could just take a few moments to
Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's all right. I already saw what I wanted to see, which is the one in the middle is the big one.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we suspected.
Right. Okay. So I'll go ahead and share the results with everybody so that they can not only, it's not just us, but everybody else can see.
So look at that. Almost 60, now over 60% are optimizing for the latest. And that's what we suspected because the latest is giving you experience and giving you performance. And in order to, the pressure we're seeing from mobile experience working its way back to web experience is forcing people like yourselves to run faster to meet the needs of marketing and the needs of that mythical chief digital officer to provide an amazing experience that still performs. And to do that, this is what we suspect, 65%.
Yeah. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and close.
Go ahead and end the poll.
Okay. Great.
All right. All right, so let's go to the
next slide.
So HTML5, this was the big dog, right? HTML5 was delivered to us from Mount Olympus, right? It was the biggest thing as an apps developer, right? As someone responsible for building apps before I came here. You know, when HTML5 came out, it was a big deal. It was going to run JavaScript. It was going to have native media types. It was going to be the most amazing thing ever. It was going to be the best development environment since COBOL. And best of all, it was going to squeeze out Flash, because remember, HTML4 came out in like 1997, which is, I believe, the year King Tut ruled Egypt. And, you know, we were dealing with Flash and we were dealing with Silverlight, which gave us great experiences, but came with a lot of, you know, challenges as well. Of course, it meant that all those websites and all those web pages we had built, in some cases thousands of them, now had to go from Flash to HTML5, but it was worth it. But the thing is, you know, as we've been informed, you know, HTML5 is the last HTML. And even if it wasn't, you know, the gap between HTML4 and HTML5, we can't afford to wait another 13 years or whatever it was. So what's happening is the browser builders are being forced to move forward on their own. And they're doing things in different ways. Now, of course, more speed is critical because, you know, as we all know, performance is the #1 reason people jump ship on a website. And, you know, brand corrosion, as we call it, from bad performance is a horrible thing. But at the same time, we're trying to create, you know, incredible experiences because we want to have that great dynamic experience that captures the people, right? We don't do websites, you know, for fun. We do them, you know, for commercial reasons. And so what's happening is these browsers are starting to diverge fairly quickly. And this is all because they're all trying to compete with the mobile experience. So what's the kiss of death? You know, what song is it you never want to hear? You never want to hear, as a browser manufacturer, security issues. And security is a big deal, you know, whether it's, you know, a major retailer, you know, that we've all heard, or multiple major retailers or other people, you know, stuff getting stolen, you know. Hackers used to be kind of gracious, right? They always promised they're not going to break the internet. 'Cause if they break the internet, they don't make any money, so they were going to steal nickels and dimes. Well, they're starting to break the internet. They're starting to go for, you know, the billion-dollar paydays. And when you look at the sheer amount of money being spent in things like security software and plugging up USB drive ports and everything else to security, the browser is still the #1 interface into every system. And so we're constantly seeing incredible amounts of effort put into security. Security, by definition, makes things slower, all right? Because you can't scan without taking some speed. And security also means limiting certain types of media types and putting pressure on a lot of what you can do in there to enforce security. So what we've seen over the past couple of years, in particular the past year, is huge amounts of shutdowns in capability and changes in the way you execute because of security. So when we look at this, let's talk about some specifics. So Chrome has decided that plugins are where all viruses come from. Okay, that's not Google saying that, but that's us looking at Google and going, they basically decided plugins are bad. Well, plugins were how we did stuff, right? Plugins were the you know, how we got great experience. So they're trying to secure the plugins through policy and review, but now all plugins have to go through the Chrome store and be certified by Google. If you don't do that, a very scary dialogue is going to come up and scare my wife, you know, which it did the other night, and what's this? What did I do wrong? And I came running over, and I said, well, you know, basically the code's unsigned, and she didn't understand what that meant, right, or anything. Basically, it says, don't do this, and she stopped doing it. And, you know, this is a big deal. So if you're basing your experience on plugins, you're going to have to, you know, look back, and, you know, and they're limiting how you do plugins. No more NP-API. Only written in JavaScript. You know, we love JavaScript. HTML5 brought us JavaScript. It brought us a real programming language inside the browser. We were all excited. You know, but JavaScript's still evolving, and it's still, you know, you need to be good. JavaScript is not for the weak of heart, you know. As I like to say as a head of engineering, JavaScript makes great programmers great, and it makes mediocre programmers dangerous. And, you know, that's what we have to do. They've also decided that Flash is the biggest source of issues, so they're using their own built-in Flash player rather than one from Adobe. So for those of us like, let's say, Keynote, who might be giving you a presentation via Adobe Connect, which is based on Flash, it has a huge implication across our business for what that means.
Hashtag irony.
Hashtag irony, right. So now, Chrome and Firefox are both sandboxing plugins. I love sandboxes. Sandboxes are great. They allow you to isolate the process, control it, monitor, shut it down, kill it, put a bullet in it, whatever you want to refer to. The only problem is it slows things down again. So it's the dynamic problem of experience versus performance. And Java code now has layers of prompting as well. So it's not just JavaScript, it's the Java. So when the Java applet starts to run, you're going to get a pop-up. And if it's got if it even remotely smells funny, you're going to get pop-ups. And as users are learning, pop-ups are bad. Anything that does this is bad because they've all got 30, user IDs and 30 passwords that all start with P and end with D. And they all don't want to go change them because they have no idea how to do it. So it's a big deal. And if your site is doing this and your site brings up that thing, don't expect them to come back to your site anytime soon, especially for commercial interaction. So let's talk about Divergence. On the screen, I have two pictures I took, one in Firefox, one in IE11, yesterday at the same time. Now, what is this site? This is an internal site. We use to monitor our agents. These are some of our mobile agents, our real phone devices. Wow, those look quite a bit different, don't they?
I'd say the difference is almost black and white.
Oh, wow. So in the room, we also have Michael, who's head of marketing and runs our website and does all these things. Michael, are you concerned about the Keynote website maybe having that level of divergence in the same...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The point is, is divergence a big deal? Only if you care about your brand. Right? And we all live in a world where the marketing people, the people pushing the designs and the websites are constantly pushing the corners to make it better, to make it, that. And if you're a 100-year-old brand that's based on luxury or performance or whatever you might, quality, brand is important, and that interaction, that beautiful experience is important. But you got to make sure it's right in every browser, and you got to make sure it stays right in every browser.
And I would think that this presents a very specific and interesting challenge for us, right, at Keynote when we're doing upgrades with our agent technology. Presumably, if visually and the rendering of the page is now different between these different browsers, then that's creating problems for us to ensure our customer scripts continue to work properly.
Well, not only do we have to ensure the customer scripts continue to operate well, we have to ensure that they look the same. So the level of monitoring we have to be able to do is different. It is more precise than ever. And part of the reason is very simple. 50% of the content of most web pages is not from the people that are pushing the web page. It's digital ads, it's JavaScript, it's tags, it's all kinds of stuff. And they all have that impact. So the key is you can't make sure, you can't just sit down and go, oh, website looks great, IE11 website looks great, Opera, the website looks great, PlayStation, it looks great, my kid's Wii, it looks great. The problem is that we got to make sure tomorrow it's great, and the next day it's great, because when 50% of the content is coming from elsewhere, it matters. And if somebody, that third-party content grows from 200 lines of JavaScript to 1,000 lines of JavaScript, it's a big difference. And the problem is we talk about gracefully downgrading experiences from, IE11 to IE9 to IE4. Well, graceful is, as I say, it's like pushing a tricycle down a staircase. So, graceful is relative. And all this divergence is key, and we're all trying to make it all the same, but remember, performance is still by far the biggest reason people leave and never, ever, ever come back. And we all know this because we're all users. We all go home at night and we log on to our favorite site to spend money we probably shouldn't be spending on stuff we probably don't need. Right? But we do it, and performance is everything. Right? If it's not fast, I either hit back or I open a new window and go there and see what I'm getting, and performance is one of the key criteria.
So I think we're going to do another poll just to make sure everybody is definitely still awake. So this is a quickie, and hopefully it'll be pretty straightforward and pretty simple. So pretty simple question. Where's the majority of your digital investment headed, web or mobile? And I'm going to go ahead and open the poll now. So again, if you're in full screen mode, zap down out of that. Go ahead and click a few responses in the poll, and we'll give you guys a few moments to present your responses in the poll here. And this is an important question, right? Because we're seeing that the traffic that is coming to the internet now is really skewing toward mobile, and it presents yet another challenge, right?
Yeah, they're very different environments, and though we spend a lot of money on mobile and having mobile specialists build us mobile apps, the fact is that the web is still the big broad experience and where we spend the most of the time engineering, because if I sit down and write an Objective-C an app, it costs me X. To create the same experience in HTML5 and JavaScript in the browser is going to cost me X plus, and that's kind of it. So, but what I see here interesting is mobile is now a third of people's majority, right?
Yep.
So where it used to be the vast majority is web and some was mobile, we're now seeing a third of people are spending more on mobile than they are.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's great. So I'll go ahead and close the poll. Anybody want last minute to go ahead and get your answer in now? But yeah, it looks like we're at 2/3, 1/3.
Now we're assuming that more than 3 people voted, because 66.33 people voted. But
yeah, great. Okay, go ahead. Move on now.
So that leads us to that, what is the future of browsers, right? So the future of browsers is we're dealing with interaction improvements, right? Continuing to push the boundaries on that. Performance, right? Continuing to push performance. But we also have the Internet of Things. And they say, well, Adam, what does the browser have to do with my car? Right? What does the browser have to do with a locomotive or a Caterpillar tractor or anything like that? Well, the fact is, Cisco has said for a while that as of this year, there will be 20 million connected IP addresses. And in 5 years, that's going to double to 50 million. And given that there's only about 7 billion people on the planet, what are those 53 billion other IP addresses doing? Well, the fact is that, because of security and all these things, what we're seeing is that browsers are actually becoming operating systems. If you look at them, they are fundamentally operating systems. They are fundamentally standalone. And the fact is that whether or not I'm interacting with it visually, right, or I'm interacting with it, non-visually, a browser now has to be a full standalone operating system that's happening. And when we look at multiple browsers, they're becoming boring. Now, people are probably out there going, what are you talking about? I use my mobile browser all the time. Well, people that are building the mobile browsers, particularly our friends at Apple and Google, the fact is what they're counting on is you will use your mobile browser till you get to something, and then you will jump over to your app to actually interact with it. So the browser just becomes almost like the table of contents for the internet, and then the app becomes the actual interaction metaphor.
So the appetizer versus the entree.
The appetizer versus the entree. So, and that's basically kind of the key thing, because now the mobile browser just needs to be secure and fast, but it doesn't need to be interactive. And that's an entirely different equation from what we have to build for the interactive experience. And again, the whole concept of having a dynamic browser that resizes and does all that responsive design becomes somewhat less relevant based on what's going on, because if you basically take them directly to a good app, they're not going to charge you a sin for having a bad mobile browser experience, because they've got the app. So that's kind of it. Now, what's the real interesting thing is, and this is still an open question, does the browser end up running mobile? All right? So I'm not talking about this week or next week or even next year, but mobile apps are really client-server. Off in the distance, I just heard Jonathan Rende, our EVP of products, cry because he hates it when I say mobile apps are client-server. But being an actual developer, I get to say that, and being an actual developer that grew up on mainframes, mid-ranges, client-server, then the web, remember, I've got a great programming language in Objective-C or Java. I got tremendously rich client-based environment. I've got a skinny pipe back to my servers and my databases. All right? So I'm not flooding the network. I'm saving my customers, network bandwidth. I'm all things, and I can create an experience I can't match in HTML5 and JavaScript. So I've got this great development environment, and it can be more secure. There's a lot of things I can do in that environment. Oh, and by the way, Google and Apple are managing the updates. They're managing the code. They're doing all the code management for me. When I've got an upgrade, they push it. There's, they've, made a huge difference. So then the question becomes, if you're Apple or you're Google, do you put iOS inside Mac OS 11 or OS 12? If you're Google, do you put Android in Chrome? Because if you do that, what happens? It means that you can run the same apps you're running on your mobile device on your desktop. And so if I'm Adam and I'm using my mobile app and I'm trading stocks or doing something like that, and there's just some really good apps out there that do this really well, and I go back and sit down on my desktop, can I run that same app on my desktop? The answer is probably yes.
It's interesting because I believe that Microsoft had kind of wanted to go in that
Yes.
direction, right?
Right, Microsoft wanted the same experience up and down the pipe with Windows, but this is where browsers are probably headed because it's the experience, it handles the security issues, and it still leaves in place that form factor of the browser, the naked browser, being the table of contents, being the search engine. But then if I want to do more than consume, I want to interact, I've got the app. Now, you ask yourself, but Adam, this is far in the future and maybe it won't happen. Remember, we developed the code that monitors this. So we can't wait to go, oh my gosh, look what happened, and then start writing code. We have to start thinking about it, architecting it now, because it's key. So will you be able to run mobile apps inside your desktop or browser? I'm pretty sure you will, and that fundamentally changes the dynamic of how the browser operates. Is it something you have to worry about? Do you, the people on the phone, have to worry about today or tomorrow? No. But it's something you need to keep in the back of your mind, because as we've stripped down these browsers and we've reverse engineered them to build the agents to monitor them, as I said, we're seeing them become full-fledged OSs. If they're becoming full-fledged OSs, the next step is they start running the apps.
Very interesting.
So what should you do? Now let's get to the what you need to do today, right? So design and test and monitor, and keep testing and keep monitoring, because everything's changing out there. Your third-party content is showing up. And you need to budget your design based on the type of page. Not all pages are equal. As Michael will tell you, there are pages where they first interact with you, where your brand is critically important and you want to do it. But there are pages where you want them, where they're doing actual interaction, where it needs to be fast, it needs to be speedy, it needs to be concise and highly secure. So you don't, when you're building your templates and you're building your style sheets, keep in mind that you want it to be very, very different based on what is going on. So pages that have high back-end latency should have much more efficient designs. And marketing pages with limited back-end have much more budget for content. And just keep that in mind. And that's kind of the guideline, because as you go through and build this stuff out, you want to keep in mind that the performance and the security balance matter. So the number of elements is still the major driver for front-end performance. So you've got to combine your JavaScript. You've got to combine, use CSS sprites. The whole point here is, as engineers, we like to do nice, clean object models. We don't want things stepping on each other. We want, great isolation. We want to do great architecture. And the fact is, when we get it in the real world of the browser, that's going to cause you a ton of performance issues. So you need to take it upon yourself to build the compound objects.
And this is especially true in the world of mobile, where on high latency wireless connections,
Yeah.
we all know hopefully everybody knows that the penalty for latency in the
wireless
connected world is much higher and much greater. So every connection counts.
Every connection
counts.
Okay. As we mentioned before, third-party placement usage is the largest challenges for front-end design. Half of your pages are made up of third-party content. You got to move all those third parties after onload and core page content. You've got to get interactivity up first. Well, that stuff's like nothing annoys me more while I'm watching an ad load and I can't scroll down to what I wanted to see. Right? And you need to audit the need for all third parties. You've got to be diligent about that. You just like in software, we try and go back every few years and clean up everything that's in there that we're not using anymore, but just kind of sticks around. It's like my sock drawer. There's lots of socks in there that don't have a pair. You need to constantly audit the need for third parties. Page size is not that critical for desktop, but file size can be. So this is a long-winded way of saying watch your images. All right, watch your images. If it's if we're up to 1,000 DPI image, got to question the value of that.
And especially today, I think if any of the folks on the phone are paying attention to the HTTP archive, right, there's some very interesting and kind of disturbing trends with regard to image size. It's continued to creep up over the course of the past 2 or 3 years since the archive has been tracking these things.
So and build your site framework to be reused. Do not reload unique. Do not load uniques. Reload, right? Cache and leverage the site framework on all pages, and limit the number of first-party domains to leverage caching. This is obvious and straightforward, but I know the people on the phone are in the same dynamic that we are, which is, marketing and the chief digital officer want to build, incredible experiences, dynamic. We want to serve up personalized content in the last millisecond, to quote one of the big dogs out there. Well, the problem is serving up unique content to individual users in the last millisecond. You can do it. Just be prepared to buy some really big pipes and put up 20 or 30,000 VMs running your website to do it. So everything has a cost. Avoid serialization at all costs. We talked about this before. If I can't interact with it, early, nothing annoys me more than that. And I won't name who is a tremendous violator of that. Don't believe that responsive design solves your performance issues. Responsive design actually, in almost every case I've seen it used, causes the opposite.
Yeah, it often exacerbates it. And we've actually published a lot of content and studies that you can find on the Keynote.com website that show you really good examples of how that difference is in fact exacerbated for the smartphone in particular.
Yeah. And then lastly, it's, you have to understand the impact of where you put stuff on the page. So things like A/B testing and on-click tracking, they must be higher on the page, because they can have major impact on rendering and performance. And then test, and that's what we're here for. So that's it. I mean, I didn't want to, waste everybody's time too much. I want to leave time for Q&A.
No, absolutely. I think everybody's probably gotten some really valuable insight, and certainly has piqued a lot of interest. Just monitoring the questions and answers that have come through here, Adam. It definitely looks like that this has been a good conversation, but only in one way. And I just want to encourage everybody at this time to make it a two-way conversation, right? Please submit your questions, and we'll go ahead and take the time that we have to answer them as much as we possibly can.
So I just wanted to call out Paul, where mobile equals browse and web equals purchase. And Paul, up until about 6 months ago, up until this Christmas season, I was 100% believer in that. And now I am personally probably buying more on Amazon mobile than I am on the web. Now that may mean that I'm on the web, on my desktop, doing it, but a lot of those purchases are getting executed mobile. I will tell you this, last Christmas, I was standing in line for a ride at Disney World, and I saw a particular brand a lot, so it's a very specific brand on a lot of people, and I was like, wow, I did not expect to see that brand. So I was standing in line, I went to my online brokerage account and bought a bunch of shares in that stock while standing in line. So I literally made that purchase decision and executed it while standing in line. And yes, I made a ton of money on that. This is the good news. But, the thing is we're seeing, and the data that came out from IBM post-Christmas on what the percentage that was being purchased via mobile was quite high. And growing faster than what was going on the web. And,
well over 20%, I think, in terms of purchase activity, and well over 50%, 55%, in fact, for the amount of traffic. So browse versus buy. Maybe there's a bit of a skew still.
Oh yeah,
but
there's
the
definitely
trend is undeniable.
right.
Right.
And I have to tell you, the online brokerage that I use has built a mobile client that is spectacular, better than the online experience via the web. In fact, I never use them except mobile.
Yeah.
So Chris O'Leary, web was successful because there was a strong need to get away from native clients from everybody. And Chris, nobody can relate to this better than I can, because in the 90s when it was client server, client server, client server, we were, it was the same thing we're going through now. So what were we doing then? Well, we had Windows, we had Mac, we had OS2, right? We had X Windows. We had all these clients that we're trying to do with client server. So we used a product from a company called Neuron Data to create a generic interface that spanned all of them, right? Because we didn't want to build. And you know what? It sucked. It was not good, but it was how we accommodated it. But it was a huge engineering challenge to try and meet all those. And when the browser showed up, it was a huge relief for all of us engineers. Sure, the first browser,
Standardization.
the first browsers were weak, and all we could do was put up a page and some basic forms, and but it was good enough. And now it's gotten great. And if you look at, SaaS, whether it's Workday or SAP, where I came from, SaaS is around because of HTML5. There's no question. That's what has really driven it, is the ability to have a great interaction. That said, the other thing we're seeing as a company, just so you're all aware, all those SaaS apps are clogging your pipes. And the more interactive those SaaS apps are, because they're all rolling out Gen 2 and Gen 3 UIs with all kinds of beautiful experience, are plugging the pipes. There are online calculators for things like Outlook 365 that tell you how much more pipe you will need per user because of SaaS. So there's an uncounted cost there that you deal with. And I think if you're on the phone and you're a SaaS applications provider, it's something I know you're struggling with right now. I've got to do beautiful experience, but I've also got to not have my clients screaming at me because everything seems slow. So yeah, the different client from Apple, different client from Google, and yeah, we're definitely moving in that direction. So what about Microsoft Spartan?
Good question.
Wow, good question. So literally, we're just in the process of downloading it, with the Windows 10 beta and going through it. It is all different from IE11. I mean, it uses some of the same components. It uses the same web rendering. What's their version of WebKit again? The name eludes me. Microsoft.
Chakra? No, that's
no, that's the JavaScript. So they're using a lot of the same things, and they will be compatible. But I think it's it's interesting that Microsoft, very much where they've IE has 11 reminds me of other applications. It's gotten so big, it was time to kind of take the eraser to the board and start over. And I think Spartan's going to be. It's going to be a challenge for us to execute by the time it comes out, but I think it was a smart move on their part. I definitely worry about compatibility, and I will tell you why. So in the process of rolling out TXP 13, oh wait, I'm not allowed to call it that anymore.
Yes, Real Browser Web Monitoring.
Real Browser Web Monitoring version 13, and I don't know why we would ever name anything unlucky release 13. But we basically ran about 7,000 test scripts against it, and including many from our customers that allow us to do that. There were 100 or so where, guess what? Those websites do not run with IE11. And not just it looks differently, black and white, it was serious errors. And we're in the process of talking to those and connecting with them. I think when Spartan comes out, it's something that the number one thing you have to realize is make no assumptions about how it works. All right, and test, and retest. And because it'll be brand new, you can expect some fairly quick follow-on updates to it. So,
just a quick note for the audience on the phone before we move to the next question. I just want to follow on to your comment, Adam, with regard to the process that we manage through whenever we do a massive agent update like we're embarking on here. One of the new things that some of the customers who've been with us for a long time will hopefully appreciate is that we're actually sharing with you some of the results of those tests. So not only in addition to for customers that their scripts are maybe more significantly impacted by by the change. But even for those where we're continuing to have great experience and a smooth transition, we want to make sure that you understand how that impacts or influences what you can expect in terms of your performance. And so for a lot of customers, especially who are using dynamic baselining for thresholds on alarms and things like that, even a modest change of maybe a second, 500 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds can make a difference. And we want to get that data to you in advance so you can prepare and make ready for what that change is going to do for you. So that's coming via an email that you'll be seeing hopefully next week, early next week. So just so everybody is aware of that.
So let's go back to Chris has a comment.
Yeah, with regard to responsive design.
And Chris, the answer to the responsive design as performance problem is that we start with the concept of responsive design being a gradual degrading, a graceful. And like I said, it's more like riding a tricycle down a staircase. And so you have to be very conscious of it's big steps. It's not trying to achieve a gradual, because if you try and achieve a gradual slope downhill, you're gonna suffer performance issues is what happens. And you're gonna end up trying to avoid the lowest common denominator. Make sure you got the right common denominator for the right level in the staircase.
Yeah, and then the key is to start with data, right? What is that experience on a smartphone? And Keynote, of course, we've got great solutions to help you to do that, but make sure you understand what that means for your mobile population.
Hey Adam, I'm going to ask you a question. By the way, everyone, I'm Michael Kopp and I run the Keynote website. I think it's really like getting all this information about the performance of browsers and what you've talked about how you should architect for performance. I think that's probably what I think of as a website owner, and to all you out in the audience who are performance people, the more you can get in front of, because it's harder to fix something that's already up there, but we're always constantly redesigning. So getting in front of marketing and being able to talk about performance and getting in front of when we start going to an agency to start doing design, getting performance built in before we design it is a lot easier. Like I would have loved, for many designs I've done to have the performance experts be able to guide me on some of this stuff before I went into design.
Right.
Because it's much harder to fix these things after you're already deployed than it is to design it in.
Yeah, and I would say that, on one side, we provide the data, the actual metrics to help you with that. We also have, a team run by Ben Rushlow, our insights team, that works with our customers extensively to do that, to point out where it is, and they can communicate with the marketing people. But, this is the age-old problem of, IT, right, and, technical people communicating with marketing people, and bridging that gap is a big one. So I wanted to go back up there. We'll come to my good friend Jens in a minute. So B2B future of the nature of the business makes it difficult to have mobile apps. Is there a semi-clear direction as to why to focus on app versus site experience? The answer is, who are your customers?
Well, in this case, maybe it's employees, right?
Right? If it's employees, who are the ultimate customers? We don't consumers. We don't say users anymore. We say consumers. If you're dealing with millennials, forget about even having a desktop. Right? If you're dealing with old guys like me, I go back and forth and I leave blameless, right, between them. So a lot of it becomes with who the ultimate consumers are. The other one is, it depends on what you're doing. If it's, if you're selling cars, right, where there's a lot of research and before you make a decision, you got to focus on where you fit in the buying cycle, right, where you fit in the marketing pipe, whatever you want to call it, what you're trying to achieve there. If you're trying to, for me, it's like I'm walking down the street and literally this happened. The screw fell out of my eyeglasses, and so the arm fell off, and so I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? So I'm holding it up with one hand, and in the other hand, I'm on Amazon, Prime, getting overnight shipped, the little screwdriver and the little screws, because you know what? It's easier for me to have it there than to remember to go to CVS and maybe be able to find it amongst all the aisles. So it depends on what you're doing.
It also occurs to me that one of the arguments we've heard for a long time with web versus mobile, discoverability, right? Web being more discoverable.
Yeah.
In the context of employees, discoverability maybe not so much of an issue.
Right.
Here's your app. Use it.
Here's your app. So now we'll go down to the next one. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So Jens, so I want everyone to know that Jens is a customer of ours. He has been, since I joined, he has been an incredibly helpful customer. He is extremely demanding. He sent me a list of like 45 things that were, annoying him. But his ability to communicate with us and our building that relationship and him building that relationship with our product management people like Abel has been great. And no, he has never let us off the hook, and he has not necessarily been...
we want all our customers.
Right, we want all our customers to have that. So what kind of options does Keynote support to measure real user experience that measure time until user experience the page to be ready and usable? If DCOM complete is no suitable criteria for this point in time, will it be possible in the future to define a custom event and use that as completion?
Yeah, and I think...
Well, I was going to say there's really two things that are going on here. One is, Keynote on a different path, we just rolled out our real user monitoring offering. So we did that right before the end of the year. We got customers up. It's a real-time environment. We track every user in real time, what they're doing, how long it's taking, what the actual performance is for what they're doing. We track all those sessions back in, and we alert in real time, again, based on what you as a customer want to set up, but we alert in real time when any performance on any element goes beyond whatever threshold you want to set. So we have a real user monitoring that our clients are now combining with the synthetic monitoring into a unified approach, which is a monitoring real users. When I see performance issuing, I then attack it with synthetic to find out what's really going on out there, what's going on in the real world, and producing some very interesting results. Now on the DOM complete is not a suitable custom event used as a completion event.
Yeah.
So that's now actually in the new release. So Jens, the answer is yes, we can now handle that kind of custom scripting and custom event in the new version that rolls out next week. And again, the reason we did it is the reason you asked.
Great. Oh my goodness. There we go. Is it better to focus future development on web apps or native apps, given the direction we're seeing the shift from browser to native in iOS and Android? Web apps consumed via native apps save money and allow for a common experience. So the wrapper approach.
I will answer the question like this. Right now, what is, whatever works best. The wrapper approach is a very viable approach depending on the content delivery. It's the kind of thing where we provided content and very little commerce over our site at this point in time. It's a great way of doing it. If you're more commercial, you probably might want to think about optimized experiences depending on what your competitors are and the rest. But to me, it's a great way of transitioning, and in some cases optional. And also remember, it's not either or. I can have mobile apps that are a mix of hybrid web-based, sourced content and custom elements. So it's not an either or conversation.
This is great. I'll just have one last call maybe for questions. We do want to make sure that we get you out of here before the hour and take advantage of a little additional time in your day. So if there's any other additional questions, go ahead and submit them now. I think we'll probably be wrapping up here pretty quickly. As we give you a few moments here to go ahead and ask those additional questions, I'm just going to drag
And Anthony's got a great point there. The native apps development can lead to siloing of resources.
Yeah.
And the point is you have to resist that at all costs, right? And this is kind of the thing. If you look at what we did, was we had people that did Firefox and people that did Chrome and people that did IE. And when we rebuilt the architecture, we went with a common code base with plugins for each of the browsers because we were isolating and we were missing things because of it. And when you're doing the same thing with native app versus web app, you can't, these two shouldn't be competing. It should be a seamless process, and so you got to avoid that siloing. So you got to look at the content management structure. For me, one of my big parts of my background is design thinking. So I'm a design thinking, zealot. And in design thinking, advocate. So I prefer zealot. Don't say anything bad about design thinking because I will come across the table at you. The point being is in design thinking, you look at the experience from end to end, not the individual features or components, and really you focus on that. And then what happens is once you have a strong vision for that end to end and what will be great, you fit the resources to the end-to-end experience, not based on the artificiality of web versus mobile. Yeah. Right now, it's a little hard to do because mobile resources are different than web resources, but you really need to...
Yeah, and from a talent standpoint, I mean, it's difficult to compete for acquiring the right talent based on, legacy experience versus current experience. So it's a tough thing.
And it's funny, as a marketing person who owns the website, like, I don't care really about how. I'm more concerned with the top line, conversions, results, customer experience. What is that customer experience? Everything you just mentioned, I'm like, as long as the performance now is good, right?
Yeah.
That's really where I need that seat at my table with somebody who is knowledgeable on performance and all these things we're talking about.
And I just want to say something, again, because having Michael here is important because, we who build stuff, we answer to a different person than Michael, who's ultimately responsible for that brand. So, and I've seen it before in many places, I've seen it here. When our CEO doesn't like something about the website, or thinks something stupid or disjointed, she goes and yells at Michael, right? Because ultimately he's the accountable one. So when the CEO, and our CEOs use the web, right? And our CEOs use mobile apps just like everybody else, and they're consumers just like all of us. When it's not right, they come and beat up the Michaels of the world, right? And sometimes, you're the poor marketing manager and the CEO comes down from on high in your billion-dollar corporation and goes, who? Michael? Are you Michael? That can be a rather chilling experience.
Yeah.
And so it's important to understand that, and that's why it's working with him because, he doesn't get to blame the IT, right? Nobody. So I think it's...
Yeah, and it's interesting, too. In the United States here, certainly we've got customers on the phone from Europe and maybe Asia Pacific as well, but we're on kind of the eve, so to speak, of a fairly significant event which is going to occur, which a lot of brands probably have invested a lot of time, energy, and hard dollars into the U.S. Super Bowl, and those types of events that have a lot of high visibility tend to be really interesting forcing situations, right, for those kinds of dynamics.
So one last thing, we've got a web monitoring today. There's a 1-week trial. We're running out of time here. I just want to reinforce. I called out Jens. I showed up here 7 months ago. I met Jens. I didn't meet him. I got emails from him. He's made our product better. He really has, and it's because of the conversation we've had with him. I invite everyone on the phone to have the same conversation with me. Whether it's me or it's Abel in product management or it's Rachel, please reach out. My email address was at the beginning of this. It's adam.thier@keynote.com. Please do not hesitate. I welcome the conversation. And, just be prepared that you may be on a conference call with me and a bunch of engineers, helping to detangle what you're thinking.
Super. Great. Well, I really appreciate your joining us here today, Adam.
Oh, no, it was fun.
Really, it's an epic topic with some epic thoughts and vision from your part. Hopefully everybody on the phone got good usage out of this time. Feel free to connect with us, connect directly with Adam or anyone else on the Keynote team, info@keynote.com, Adam's email address. And as I mentioned before, there's a couple links here that are currently in your browser that you can go ahead and download. For example, the slides from the presentation. I've also included a few blog posts that Adam has graciously written for us, and there will continue to be more, which I encourage you to subscribe to the RSS feed on our blog to continue to get those updates. A lot of good things coming out from the community here. Lastly, you will receive an email from us just kind of wrapping things up, and you'll have access to the recording if you want to go ahead and share that with your colleagues. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you, and have a great day.
Bye now.